Morning at the lumberyard bustled with activity. Tuan, the operations manager, sat among neatly stacked piles of timber, carefully recording the inflow and outflow of wood into the company's logbook. His brow was furrowed in concentration, occasionally pausing to call and report updates to his supervisors. Around him, the sharp buzz of saws mixed with the steady rhythm of laboring workers filled the air. At the same time, in the company office, CEO James sat on a sofa, scanning through messages and reviewing his task list. Upon noticing that Ly Tu Diep needed a space to raise chickens at her small farm, he didn't hesitate. He immediately assigned Tuan to deliver a suitable amount of quality wood to help her build the chicken coop. Tuan received the request with a bright smile, happy to help. He understood that a simple act like this wasn't just about delivering materials. It was about supporting a kind-hearted, resilient colleague like Ly Tu Diep. Once his reports were completed, Tuan quickly got to work. He selected the strongest, most durable wood, loaded it onto a truck, and began the drive toward the farm. The route was lined with green hills and forested slopes, and Tuan felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing his work could ease someone else's burdens. When he arrived, Ly Tu Diep was in the garden, tending to rows of leafy greens. She looked up in surprise at the truck pulling up to the gate, then smiled warmly when she saw who it was. Tuan climbed down, his face bright with enthusiasm. As he helped unload the wood and move it to the construction area, he chatted with her casually, his voice cheerful. He explained that James had given clear instructions. Ly Diep could now use all resources at the farm freely. She no longer needed to worry about returning any revenue. Ly Diep stood quietly for a moment, taking in the news. Her expression softened, eyes glinting with emotion. She hadn't expected this. The gesture was simple, yet filled with meaning. A quiet, unwavering support from James. As the last load of wood was placed, Tuan turned to her with a grin. "If you ever need anything else, just let me know. I'll be there." Ly Diep nodded gratefully, her eyes shining with a small, honest happiness. After Tuan drove away, she stood for a moment, looking at the stack of wood in front of her. For the first time in years, her heart overflowed with a hope she hadn't dared to hold before. A future, one she could build with her own hands. And alongside that, the quiet strength of someone who believed in her. At a small cafe adorned in festive Christmas colors, James sat across from an important business partner, deep in discussion about equity funding plans for the company's upcoming projects. The atmosphere was professional, the conversation focused. James confidently presented the company's achievements over the past year, proudly mentioning a revenue of 125 billion VND. But he didn't shy away from the challenges. He openly shared the rising pressure of operational costs and the urgent need for stable capital to support further growth. The partner listened attentively. After a moment of reflection, he requested James to provide full documentation, including detailed revenue reports, breakdowns of operating expenses, and copies of recent business contracts for thorough due diligence. James agreed without hesitation, confident that the company's transparency and professionalism would be more than enough to earn the partner's trust. Meanwhile, at Ly Tu Diep's small hut on the hillside, a different kind of meeting was taking place, one filled with quiet emotion. Lynn, James's trusted assistant, had come to visit. She gently informed Ly Tu Diep that she would soon be transferring to another branch, taking on a new assignment far away. There was a pause before Lynn spoke again, her voice soft but sincere. "I've always admired your strength, your kindness, and how real you are. Even though we won't be working together anymore, I hope you stay strong and happy, especially with someone like James by your side." Ly Diep fell silent for a moment. A subtle sadness flickered in her eyes. She hadn't expected to feel so affected by this farewell. Lynn had become more than a co-worker. She had become a true friend, someone who had quietly supported her during some of the darkest times. But still, she smiled, genuine and warm. "I wish you all the best, and I hope one day we'll see each other again, in a better time. A better place." Lynn stepped forward and embraced her, tightly. The hug said more than words ever could. In that moment, Ly Tu Diep realized how much she had come to treasure this friendship. A rare, honest bond that had helped restore her faith in people, in herself, and in the quiet strength of human connection. As Lynn disappeared down the trail, Ly Tu Diep stood on the porch, watching until her figure faded from sight. There was a strange ache in her chest, part loneliness, part hope. The afternoon light softened as the sun dipped lower, and the little hut returned to its familiar stillness. But something inside Tu Diep had shifted. A quiet resolve began to take root. She would be stronger. She would live better, not just for herself, but for those who had believed in her. For Lynn, for James. As the golden light of the late afternoon settled across the hillside, Tu Diep returned to her small hut after a long, tiring day working on the farm. From a distance, she noticed a familiar figure beneath the trees. James. He was busy repairing her hut, hammer in hand, replacing old wooden planks that had worn down with time. She walked closer, her steps slowing as emotion welled in her chest. This man, so refined, so used to the comforts of city life, was here, sleeves rolled up, sweat on his brow, doing hard labor just to make her home safer, warmer. James turned and saw her. He smiled gently, wiped the sweat from his forehead and said softly, "I noticed the hut hadn't been fixed in a while, so I thought I'd help a little. I want to make things a bit easier for you." Tu Diep looked down, her cheeks flushing with quiet joy. "Thank you, but you really don't have to do this. I don't want to trouble you." James stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "Helping you isn't a burden, it's something I want to do." Later they sat beside each other, taking a moment to rest. James gently held her hand, sharing stories, encouraging her to look at life in a brighter way. Then he paused and asked softly if she would consider working at his company. Tu Diep listened in silence. Though her heart was touched, she couldn't hide her doubts. She still carried the weight of her past, of feeling not good enough, not educated enough. James noticed. He held her hand tighter, his voice full of quiet sincerity. "I believe you can do it. I don't want to see you working this hard forever. You deserve better, and I know you're capable of more." She looked at him, her eyes uncertain. "But what if I can't? I don't want to be a problem for you." James smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "I believe in you more than you believe in yourself. Just trust yourself a little. That's all I ask." He leaned in slightly, eyes full of warmth and mischief, and placed a soft kiss on her cheek. Tu Diep gasped, startled, then quickly looked away, only to break into a shy, sweet laugh. James stood up with a grin, gave her one last playful look, then jogged out into the garden. Tu Diep remained seated, her heart racing. She had never imagined this kind of affection. Gentle, honest, full of patience. And now, sitting there with the fading light around her and the echo of his touch still lingering, she realized something had changed. Something inside her had quietly bloomed. At the company's small workshop, the air was already filled with the spirit of spring. James arrived early that morning, a bright smile on his face. He greeted each employee with warmth and sincerity, his cheerful presence lighting up the atmosphere. When everyone had gathered, James stood before the group and delivered a surprise announcement. He had decided to extend the holiday break from 2 days to 3. The room lit up with excitement and disbelief. Eyes widened, smiles spread, and murmurs of joy filled the space. But James wasn't finished. He went on to share that each employee would receive an increased TET bonus, a gesture of appreciation for the effort and dedication they had poured into the company throughout the past year. Not only that, he announced a special support fund, 10 million dong for 2 employees whose family members were battling serious illnesses. The gift came with full pay, even if they needed to take time off work to care for their loved ones. Standing there, James felt a quiet pride settle in his chest. To him, the company wasn't just a workplace, it was a shared home, a place where hardships and joys were carried together, where every member mattered. After the heartfelt gathering, James drove out to the farm where Tu Diep lived. He wanted to spend a little time fixing up her space, as a small surprise for the coming new year. He watered her lush vegetable garden, swept every corner around the hut, then went out on his own to chop wood for support posts and dig a trench for drainage. Small improvements that would make her daily life more convenient and her home more comfortable. He did everything carefully, joyfully, knowing that these quiet touches would bring a smile to the woman he loved. When most of the work was finished, James stood in the middle of the garden, looking around at what he had done with a look of quiet satisfaction. By late afternoon, Tu Diep returned from work. She stopped in her tracks, overwhelmed by what she saw. The space around her little hut had been transformed, tidy, welcoming, and full of quiet warmth. Her eyes welled up with emotion. She looked around, taking in every small detail, then turned to James, who walked toward her with a soft smile. They exchanged a gaze full of tenderness. Tu Diep thanked him, her voice trembling with gratitude and quiet joy. Tears glistened at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of a deep, heartfelt happiness. Together they harvested the full green cabbages she had grown, preparing a simple dinner that evening. It wasn't a grand meal, but it was filled with laughter, affection, and quiet moments of contentment. And in that small, humble hut, they welcomed the new year, hopeful, loved, and ready to write the next chapter of their lives together. As the afternoon sun began to dip behind the hills, Tu Diep bustled around the small kitchen, preparing a warm and simple year-end meal to welcome her first Lunar New Year with James. She washed the vegetables slowly, sliced the meat with care, and gently lit the fire to start cooking. Every movement, quiet, practiced, held the weight of her hopes. This evening was not just a dinner. It was a rare moment of warmth in a life that had been marked by too many years of sorrow. Meanwhile, James arrived with something special in hand, a peach blossom branch he had decorated himself. The end-of-year work rush hadn't allowed him to find a real one, so he had spent hours fixing on delicate fake blossoms and stringing colorful lights across the branches. Now, he placed the handmade branch at the front of the hut, smiling softly to himself as he imagined the look of joy that might appear on Tu Diep's face. When she stepped outside and saw it, her heart swelled. She was touched, deeply moved by the thoughtfulness of his gesture. But even as she smiled, something inside her remained quiet and heavy. Later, as they sat together waiting for the rice to cook, Tu Diep slowly began to open up. Her voice trembled as she spoke of the past, the pain of being rejected by her husband's family, the years of emotional abuse and loneliness. "I used to think I'd never escape the darkness," she whispered, "that I'd never have even a small light of my own." James didn't interrupt. He sat beside her, his eyes full of tenderness and compassion. He reached out, gently wiped the tears from her cheek, and softly said, "You're not alone anymore. I'll stay by your side always. You won't have to cry like that again." His words, steady and sincere, reached into the deepest part of her. Something fragile inside Tu Diep shifted, softened. For the first time in a long while, she didn't just feel protected, she felt seen. As night fell and the stars began to peek through the sky, the small hut came alive with joy when James invited the children from the nearby village to come and celebrate the new year. Laughter filled the air. The kids squealed with delight as they received red envelopes and sweets. Their innocent chatter and happy cheers brought a bright energy to the space. Some of the bolder ones even joked, "When will you and Miss Diep get married? Can we come to the wedding next year?" Everyone laughed, James and Tu Diep included. Their eyes met in a moment full of warmth and understanding. No words were needed. In that shared look was a quiet promise that no matter what storms may come, they would face them together. That this life, this simple life built with care, kindness, and love, was finally beginning. And for Tu Diep, it was the beginning of a spring sweeter than any she had ever known.
Ram hòa vào nỗi đau của chính mình. Hương mỉm cười buồn xua tay, "Không sao đâu, còn bạn thì sao?" Diệp cúi đầu giọng nhỏ dần, "Tôi đã ly hôn rồi, giờ tôi ở tạm trang trại của một người bạn." Hương gật đầu, ánh mắt sáng lên. "như nghe đến từ bạn, nghe nói người đó là chủ tịch rất giàu đúng không?" Cô hỏi, giọng tò mò. Giúp gật đầu, làm chợt nặng trĩu nghĩ đến James. Là anh ấy rất tốt, nhưng tôi chỉ là người phụ nữ đã ly hôn. Tôi không xứng đáng với anh ấy nên đã từ chối tình cảm của anh ấy. Cô thú nhận, giọng run rẩy như sắp khóc. Hương nhìn Diệp, đau lòng nhói trước sự tự ti của bạn mình. Cô ấy xứng đáng được yêu thương hơn bất kỳ ai. Sao cô ấy lại tự giao mình trong nỗi đau như vậy? Hương nghĩ, tay nắm chặt lấy tay Diệp. "Rồi, tôi đồng cảm với bạn," nói đôi giọng điệu dịu dàng nhưng kiên định. "Giang là người tốt, anh ấy giàu có và quan tâm bạn. Tại sao bạn phải từ chối?" Chúng ta chỉ sống một lần, hãy nghe theo trái tim mình.